Here's what most people fasting for cancer prevention are getting completely wrong. They skip a meal, watch the clock tick past 16 hours, and assume the deep cellular work is happening. But your body does not care what time your last meal was. It cares about its internal chemistry. And if that chemistry is not right, the clock is almost meaningless. Dr. Steve Collins here, and on the Dr. Steve channel, we go where the evidence leads. No shortcuts, no hype, just the science your body actually needs. So let's get into it. What we're talking about today is autophagy, the cellular repair process that has serious researchers genuinely excited in the context of cancer biology. And more importantly, we're talking about how to know whether your fasting protocol is actually triggering it, or whether you're putting in the hours for almost none of the benefit. Because here's what almost no one tells you. You can fast for 18 hours straight and still not activate deep cellular cleanup. And we're going to show you exactly why that happens. Let's start with how your body actually uses fuel during a fast, because this is precisely where conventional fasting advice collapses before it even begins. When you stop eating, your body does not immediately switch into repair mode. It is far too smart for that. It will always reach for the easiest available energy source first. That means glucose circulating in your bloodstream. Once that's cleared, it moves to glycogen, the stored carbohydrate sitting in your liver and muscles. Only after those reserves are genuinely depleted does the deeper metabolic shift we're looking for actually begin. For most people, that shift happens somewhere between 17 and 24 hours into a fast. Before that window, your metabolism is still operating largely on stored carbohydrates. The cellular repair machinery has not fully powered on yet. Now, a 12-hour overnight fast is still meaningful and worth doing. Research supports the idea that an extended overnight fast helps stabilize insulin, supports metabolic flexibility, and may reduce the risk of certain cancer recurrences. Those benefits are real and they matter. But if deeper cellular cleanup is your actual goal, especially as someone navigating a cancer journey, the overnight fast is typically just the entry point, not the destination. And we want to say this directly because it matters enormously. Longer is not always better. If your body is already depleted, if your fatigue isn't mild tiredness but a heavy, systemic exhaustion, then pushing into extended fasting without first restoring your metabolic foundation is not a sign of commitment. It is counterproductive. Your body cannot repair what it doesn't have the energy to repair. We always match the strategy to the biology in front of us. That is intelligent, evidence-based science, not compromise. Sign 1. Mental clarity. So what does it actually look like when autophagy is beginning to engage? The first real signal often shows up in your brain before it appears anywhere else. As glycogen reserves run low, your liver begins producing ketones. Think of ketones as a cleaner burning alternative fuel. Your mitochondria, the power stations inside every cell, process them with significantly less oxidative stress than they generate when burning glucose. For the brain especially, this shift is deeply meaningful. Many people describe it as a fog lifting. Thoughts sharpen, energy feels even and sustained rather than spiking and collapsing every few hours. That calm, steady focus is a real physiological event, not imagination or wishful thinking. Here's why it matters specifically in a cancer context. Oxidative stress is one of the key contributors to cellular damage. When your cells are running on a fuel that generates less oxidative waste, the entire repair environment improves. This metabolic shift, from glucose dominant to ketone supported, often coincides with the early activation of autophagy. Your body's internal cleanup process begins to genuinely switch on. But, and this is critical, not everyone feels that clarity signal, particularly if you're recovering from treatment, managing hormonal therapy, or still rebuilding lean mass after significant weight changes. The signal may not come through cleanly. That does not mean autophagy isn't happening, and it does not mean something is wrong with your biology. We worked with someone who was actively chasing that mental clarity. She had heard about it repeatedly online, tried extended fasting multiple times, and felt foggy and irritable every single time without exception. When we looked at the full clinical picture, her protein intake was too low and her blood sugar was unstable throughout the entire day. Those two factors alone were blocking the metabolic shift entirely. Once her nutritional foundation was corrected, and only then, short strategic fasting windows produced exactly the calm, clear energy she had been seeking. The fasting was never the problem. The order of operations was. This is educational, not medical advice. We're evidence-led here, and we always manage risk carefully. Sign 2, mild fatigue, not exhaustion. Now, the next signal is one that gets consistently misread by nearly everyone. Mild fatigue during a fast is not a warning sign. Autophagy is a repair process, and repair carries a real metabolic cost. Your body is deliberately redirecting resources inward. You might feel quieter, slightly slower, less externally stimulated. That internal settling can actually be a sign that meaningful cellular maintenance is underway. What is not acceptable to push through, what your body absolutely does not want you to ignore, is profound exhaustion, dizziness, shaking, a heavy, depleted sensation that refuses to lift. That is not a sign of deep cellular repair. That is a biological distress signal. Learning the difference between these two physiological states is one of the most important skills you can develop in any evidence-based fasting approach. If you are consistently hitting that second state, fasting is not the tool to reach for right now. The priority becomes restoring, correcting nutrient deficiencies, optimizing protein intake, rebuilding sleep quality, stabilizing macronutrient balance throughout the day. These are the genuine foundations. Fasting is a tool you earn by building the metabolic base first. Sign 3. Physical signs of ketosis. Now watch this, because this is where the science gets genuinely important. Ketosis and autophagy are not the same process. This is one of the most commonly collapsed distinctions in the fasting space, and it sends people's strategies in entirely the wrong direction. Ketosis simply means your body is burning fat and producing ketones as a byproduct. Autophagy is a specific cellular program, the process by which your cells identify, dismantle, and recycle damaged components, including potentially precancerous cellular material. These two processes often overlap, but one absolutely does not guarantee the other. The critical variable is insulin. Even during a fast, if insulin remains elevated, which happens in the presence of insulin resistance, or when the eating window before the fast was heavily loaded with refined carbohydrates, your body's cellular machinery reads the internal environment as a fed state. The repair signal is muted. Autophagy is blunted before it even begins. This is why your metabolic context before and during a fast matters far more than the number of hours on the fasting clock. A 20-hour fast layered on top of poor insulin signaling may produce significantly less cellular repair than a well-constructed 16-hour fast following a genuinely nutrient-dense eating window. Do you see why simply counting hours is missing the entire biological point? Sign 4. Hunger comes in waves. Another signal worth understanding carefully is hunger, and what it actually tells you during a fast. Hunger is partly driven by a hormone that rises in predictable cycles throughout the day. That is why you often feel hungry at your usual mealtimes, even when your body has no genuine need for immediate fuel. Early in a fast, hunger can spike sharply. That spike feels urgent and real. But here is what the evidence suggests. After approximately 12 to 18 hours, that hunger signal typically stabilizes. Sometimes it quiets almost completely. It arrives in waves. It builds, it peaks, and then it recedes on its own without any intervention. For cancer survivors and those in active recovery, this signal carries significant additional complexity. Some people experience persistently suppressed appetite as a lingering effect of treatment. Others find that stress-driven eating patterns have disconnected them from genuine metabolic hunger cues entirely. The work here isn't only about managing fasting windows, it is about relearning what your body's actual signals mean in your specific biological context, where you are right now. So here is the uncomfortable question we need to ask directly. What if you are doing all of this and cellular repair is still not activating? You can fast. You can log the hours carefully. You can produce ketones and feel that mild fatigue and still fail to create the internal environment where deep cellular maintenance actually takes hold. There are several specific mechanisms that block it, and each one matters. Chronically elevated blood sugar is probably the most widespread barrier. Insulin functions as the body's primary traffic controller for cellular storage signaling. When it is elevated, every metabolic pathway reads the environment as abundance, not repair. The cellular cleanup program stays completely dormant. Insulin resistance is particularly prevalent in individuals who have undergone certain chemotherapy protocols, steroid treatments, or experienced significant metabolic disruption during cancer care. If refined carbohydrates dominate the eating window, insulin can remain elevated for hours after the last meal, erasing directly into the fasting window's effectiveness. Chronic stress is the second major block, and it is chronically underestimated. Cortisol raises blood glucose even in the complete absence of food. This is an ancient biological survival mechanism designed to keep fuel available under immediate physical threat. In the context of a healing biology, however, chronically elevated cortisol means chronically elevated blood sugar means a chronically suppressed repair environment. Structured movement, deliberate breathwork, intentional recovery practices, these are not optional lifestyle suggestions. For someone genuinely trying to optimize cellular repair, they are metabolic medicine. Sleep deprivation closes the door through precisely the same pathway. 4 or 5 hours of fragmented sleep elevates cortisol, disrupts growth hormone release, one of the key biological drivers of nighttime cellular repair, and keeps blood sugar dysregulated throughout the entire following day. You can fast for 20 hours on consistently broken sleep and recover almost none of the cellular benefit you are genuinely working toward. If you're finding real value here, subscribe now, because what follows is where all of this comes together into an actual, workable strategy. The metabolic foundation always comes first. Whole foods, quality protein, healthy fats, and vegetables that feed the gut ecosystem and reduce the chronic inflammation fire that competes directly against cellular repair. Protein is not optional here. Lean mass is metabolically protective. It supports immune function, stabilizes blood sugar, and creates the physiological resilience that allows strategic fasting to work the way it is supposed to. Refined carbohydrates are removed, not from dietary ideology, but because of fundamental insulin signaling biology. Every significant insulin spike narrows the time window in which autophagy can genuinely operate. Processed foods don't simply fail to nourish, they actively interfere with the repair environment we are methodically trying to build. Sleep is non-negotiable, not just for subjective rest, but because deep sleep phases are precisely when growth hormone peaks and cellular maintenance is most biologically active. When sleep is disrupted, that repair window closes hard. Addressing sleep dysfunction comes before extending any fasting protocols. That sequence matters. Cortisol management becomes a core pillar. Walking, resistance training, breath work, structured recovery blocks throughout the week. These progressively lower the background inflammation burden that, when left unaddressed, suppresses every repair pathway we care about. Think about someone who has been fasting consistently for weeks and cannot understand why the metabolic shift never comes. The answer is almost never fast longer. It is almost always build the foundation that actually makes fasting work. Once blood sugar stabilizes, once sleep is genuinely protected, once the inflammatory burden begins to fall, then occasional strategic fasting can produce real, measurable improvements in energy, metabolic markers, and cellular resilience. Not aggressive, not frequent, occasional, deliberate, and layered on top of a metabolic base that genuinely supports the repair process we are aiming for. Autophagy clears damaged cellular components, quiets inflammatory signaling, and supports brain, gut, and immune function simultaneously. But it does not operate in metabolic chaos. It requires stability as its foundation. Here is the question we want you genuinely sitting with right now. What does your metabolic environment actually look like before the fast even begins? Because that single answer determines almost everything about whether the fasting hours you put in are producing real cellular work or simply passing time. And here is what most fasting guides never actually reach. What you eat during your eating window may matter even more than how long your fasting window runs. That is exactly what we are breaking down next, and you will not want to miss it.